Greetings, everyone. This
Greetings,
is
Narnians.
kind of our last class, okay? Next week we are off, and then 2 weeks from today we will have the MFAs do their last thing, and hopefully at the house we'll have more food and all sorts of things. We should let Paula coordinate that. Maybe I'll email you. I'll make a big thing of baked mashed potatoes. I make some good homemade mashed potatoes, so I'll make a big thing of that. We'll have lots of food. And again, I'm wearing my husky mask. So, the last battle, again, the only children's novel ever published where all the kids are dead at the end and they're happy. And we're supposed to be happy, except for Susan. We'll talk about Susan later. But what I love about this book, especially if you listen to the radio play program, is the opening scene between Puzzle and Shift. I mean, it's a pretty deeply sort of psychological study of these two characters. But even when my kids were really little, listening in the car, they knew immediately what was going on. I mean, they may not have a word for it, a psychological word for it, but they recognize immediately the way that Shift is manipulating Puzzle. And I remember them getting mad, especially my son in the background, like that with his fists and stuff like that. And but when you read Puzzle and Shift, I don't know if Lewis, the word wasn't really big in Lewis's day, but today we speak about a codependent relationship. You probably all know these words. In what sense are Shift and Puzzle codependent? What does that mean, first of all? If, let's say the husband's alcoholic and the wife. What does it mean to say they have a codependent relationship?
They both exist together. Like they're not acting as individuals.
Good.
Everything is done in relation to the other. Like he's always collecting food for him. He's telling him what he needs. He's the donkey's doing everything the ape wants, and then the donkey is basically saying, "I can't make any decisions."
Good.
And he's constantly looking towards the ape to decide what they should do or how they should do it.
Good.
And they kind of set that up before he gets the lion skin, right? So
good. You can see it right away the way they are.
Right away.
Yeah. Well, they also, though, in a codependent relationship, they're neither is able to operate without the other.
Good.
Enforcing their action, enforcing the other's actions, or agreeing with the other's actions. So, if the monkey needed bananas, instead of the donkey saying, "There are no bananas in this part of the world
Good.
ever," he says, "Well, I'll go find you some." And so, and I don't know if the monkey would know what a banana was.
It's true. That's a good point.
You know what I mean? Had the donkey brought back a potato. And so it was just how their relationship worked.
Good. So what is it like if the husband is, let's say, alcoholic and abusive, why does the wife often not leave? What does it mean that she's codependent?
Well,
You're getting at it.
it's like they don't really understand the worth that they have
Good.
as an individual. They find their worth in the other person's
Good.
opinion, or it's like there's no sense of self-confidence.
Good. Can you see that in Shift? I'm sorry, in Puzzle? Can you see that in Puzzle? Yeah.
Most definitely.
The poor guy.
But I actually thought, there are parts where it is codependent, but I think the Shift is just a narcissist.
Oh, yeah, he's the bad one. It's not like Puzzle's bad, but it's like, why does he keep staying in there? We say that at my house. You know what weak chests, apes have, And, it's like, but you've got hands. You can go in the water and take it. Well, no, we have weak chests. And just the endless manipulation of him back and forth, and I love it when Shift comes back and, he's sewn it. And he's like, "Hey, go on, put this lion skin on." He goes, "I'm tired." He goes, "Look you've been having a nice, refreshing walk." Right? He's like freezing to death, right? And I'm working my fingers to the bone, right? And that sense, but because Puzzle is partly to blame too. He is ultimately the victim, but he doesn't realize it till quite the end. And it's kind of interesting that some characters get mad at Puzzle, but then Jill kind of feels more sorry for him, and she takes his side. And then actually later, Lucy takes his side too, and they go back and forth. And we never as often is the case, we never find out what exactly Aslan said to the donkey. Because at first, the donkey looks sorrowful, and then the donkey smiles. What do you think Aslan said to him? You ever think about it?
I think that's in chapter 8.
Oh, maybe you didn't get to the end. Okay. It's the very end.
So,
It's like the last page almost.
I think sort of, not knowing exactly what he said, but like as with everybody else, he probably said something about the things he's done wrong.
Good.
But then, whether it was just listening to Shift the whole time or whatever. But then, I also think, somehow or another, he made, I don't know what he would have said to the donkey other than you're worth something, or made a joke of what had happened.
Good.
That's the only thing I could figure out what he said to him.
There is something there. Remember what Aslan said to Jill at the end of the silver chair? I will not always be scolding. Remember that? So maybe, and there's an idea, maybe it was an affirmation of his self-worth. This thing is like harder to talk in than my other one. Anyway, I thought I'd wear it because it's cool, but it's strangling me.
The vengeance is mine.
Oh, that's an interesting. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Kind of what Jesus says in, I think it's First John, where he talks about how he'll make everything right.
Oh, good.
One day all wrongs will be made right.
Good. And we certainly see that in this book. This is unbelievable. The whole last third is in heaven, and it's just like, oh my gosh, and it gets wilder and wilder, opens and opens and opens. But it's just interesting, because I don't think when Lewis was writing, anybody was talking about that word codependency. But he gets it right. He helps us to understand what Puzzle's doing and how he gets sucked into the whole thing. And Shift is just, the way he's so manipulative. He goes, look, I want you to do good things, right? I'm good at thinking, so I'll do that. But I don't try to do everything. I let you jump in the pool, didn't I? He's like, I know. You ever met anybody like Shift, who's shifty, right?
Yeah.
But he does get his comeuppance, right? He ends up being what we call a figurehead, right? Sooner or later, they're manipulating Shift as much as Shift is manipulating Puzzle. And
Due to his own, he's gone from being, he becomes dependent upon the alcohol or the
Good.
drugs that they're feeding him in order to survive.
Good.
He can't survive without a drink. He yells towards it.
Good.
Right. Without his wine or whatever. And so it totally changes. The codependency changes because,
Good.
and I guess codependency also has a lot to do with placing guilt on both ends.
Good.
The person who's the stronger in the group, in this case the manipulator, he's placing guilt on the other for not doing what they say, and then the one who's on the receiving end of that is then feeling guilty for not living up to the expectations. So that's where the dependency really sort of sets. And so it sort of switches. And so in that part, when the cat and then the
Colorman, Rishta Tarkan.
That guy, and he where he takes over, and so where he then becomes like the ass, and in the situation,
Good.
He is the ass.
He is.
Sort of the joke.
And he tries. What does Shift try to convince all the other animals that he is? Did you like that? I'm a man, right? Could you almost hear him singing a song from Disney?
Yeah.
I want to be like you, King Louis of the Apes, right? And it gets ridiculous. And Lewis was a fan of what's called Animal Farm. And I don't know if you've read Animal Farm, but all animals are equal. And then it's like somebody changes to, but some animals are more equal than others, as the pigs start acting like the men and sleeping in beds and all that sort of stuff. So it's a little bit of an allegory there for that. To me, I think that one of the core things in the last battle is that technically Narnia is destroyed from the outside by the Calormans coming in and destroying them. But it's really more internal moral decay that starts things. And that's important for us, If we get destroyed, it's going to start from within as we weaken ourselves from within. And that so-called friendship between puzzle and shift is the beginning of all sorts of decay. Right? And it might, whether Lewis had this in mind, how was it that just normal Germans went along with the Holocaust? How did they do it? Right? I mean, remember, he's writing this in the shadow of World War II. How did they go along? And at one point, Puzzle says, remember at the end of chapter 1, there's that thunder strike. And Puzzle says, oh, no. See, Aslan's mad at me for dressing up as a lion and all. And of course, what does Shift say? It is shifty way. Did you pick up on that, what he does? Manipulates him. Yeah. Says, well, no. I was just about to say, if you're in favor of this, send us a sign. But the sign came before I could say it. What the donkeys know about signs. Okay, he fakes them out. Like I said, it's an amazing, deeply psychological beginning to this novel. And that corrupted friendship sort of spreads out to, corruption in Narnia and everything else.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's due to the naive nature and of the donkey thinking that no one's going to come and really do ill will or do something bad to you and lead you astray on purpose with ill intentions.
Good.
And I don't know. I think the whole thing sort of scares me as to being what's happening to us.
I know that we can be so easily manipulated.
Yeah, because I'm just a sheep right now. I don't want to be a sheep.
It was really scary. I remember the first realization I had back in the spring. The first time, I actually went out to the supermarket with my mask on to shop because I needed food. And everybody, you've noticed this, they kind of go into a zombie state where you sort of look down, you don't talk, you just keep. And I thought, this reminds me of something, but I don't know what. And then I realized it's exactly the same way we do when we go through security at the airport, before all these masks and all. It's like we're already being trained to just be docile, look at your feet, and go through the motions. I don't know, there's something scary about it. We want to make sure the cure is not worse than the disease, as they say, right? I don't know. But again, this is, you see how cool it is when you read this in the original order? We just read the book of Genesis, didn't we? And now we're reading the book of Revelation. You see how we go from beginning to end? When you read it in the original order, it's really kind of neat as you do that way. And here, it's the end of Narnia. This is the revelation or apocalypse, the end of this world. And it starts with, a random ape and donkey. And when the donkey pretends to be Aslan, he is literally a false Aslan. Or how would you put that in English? Say again. Got a false prophet. And if Aslan is the Christ figure, it's like an Antichrist. Antichrist is literally the false Christ, the false Messiah. And that's what he becomes, the false Messiah. And here's something we need to be careful of, especially in the church. As all the bad stuff is going on in the name of Aslan, did anybody notice the phrase they keep using to justify it? Well, he is not a tame lion, right? And of course, that phrase is true, right? It is true. We saw it, back in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So what's wrong? I mean, it is true that Aslan's not a tame lion. So what mistake are they making? Okay, good. Right? They're not balancing. And see, to me, I would think the church today would be fooled in a different way. We're not fooled by someone saying, he's not a tame lion or he's a God of wrath. I think we're fooled by, he's a God of love. It just seems we've gone the other extreme. In other words, we do see the love, and that's good, but we've forgotten the holiness, the wrath, the other part of God, the wrath against sin and things. So when I read this, I think we're doing the equal and opposite problem. We're only seeing half the picture. And again, it's not easy to hold together, God's holiness and his mercy, right? I mean, come on, when you read the Bible and you read the Old and New Testament, what are we sometimes tempted to think about the Old and New Testament? That we've got what here? Yeah, doesn't it almost seem like two different gods? That Old Testament God is always angry and zapping people and all that, and the other one is all about love and meek and mild, but it's not really true when you read carefully, right? I mean, do we ever see the wrathful side of Jesus in the Gospels? Yeah, turn those tables upside down. Great times. And woe to you, Pharisees and hypocrites.
And then
You know?
he tell you that I didn't come to bring peace. I came in the fire sword to turn
Good.
a man's home against itself.
Good.
Father against mother. Father against son, mother against daughter, neighbor against neighbor.
Good. Right. Come bring a sword.
God's peace is not the same as the world peace.
Good.
You see what I'm saying?
It's not just the absence of strife, right? It's a deeper kind of peace.
He even
Peace
told
is
his
heaven.
almost number one disciple, Peter, to get behind me, Satan.
That's right. Get behind me, Satan. Wow. Have you ever wanted to say that to Clinton? Sorry, I didn't. Lupe, okay.
Just Lupe.
Just Lupe says that, okay. There's Lupe. The wolf. But but it is difficult. And then, of course, are there signs of God's love in the Old Testament? Where do we see the signs of the love and mercy of God? Can you think of places in the Old Testament?
Kill all of the Israelites for worshiping a cow.
That's good. That's right. The golden calf. And he's about, Moses intercedes. Please don't do this, Lord. Right? And, I mean, he did finally destroy Sodom, but only when he couldn't find even, 10. Couldn't even find 10 people. 10 righteous people. You know? And, like I said, I can almost imagine Abraham thinking, okay, if I can get him down to 10, I mean, we've got Lot and his wife, that's 2, and they got 2 daughters, and, they must have married some good guys, that's 6, maybe they have a couple of kids, But it's like, no, it's not going to work. But he would have showed mercy, right? What about the book of Ruth? Like that book? That shows his mercy, helping Ruth, or the book of Jonah. Do you know why Jonah runs away when God tells him to go preach the gospel to the Ninevites?
Because Jonah knew that he was a forgiving God.
Yeah.
He was going to be patient. He was going to be loving. He was going to give him another chance.
Good. And he doesn't want that because he hates them. I mean, these are bad guys. These Assyrians were bad dudes, right? And he doesn't want, literally, he doesn't want to save them. And the end of it, when he does preach and they're saved, he's like, that's what I told you, man. I knew you were going to do that. You're too merciful. I don't know if you remember what little sort of parable that God teaches. Remember at the very last book of Job, he's out there, and what does God cause to grow?
Oh, you mean the plant that
Good. It's a plant that like shades him, right? And then it shades him, and then God sends a worm, and what happens? Withers away. And then Job was like so angry about it. And God says to him, what? You remember?
Who is you? I mean, you didn't make the tree.
Yeah.
You didn't make it grow. Since you don't have any say so.
Good.
What I do.
Good. You're upset about that. You're not upset about all these thousands of people over here. Plus women and children and cattle. He mentions too. God seems to care about the cattle too, which is interesting. Right? So we do see sign. But I mean, it is hard. I think almost anybody that reads the Bible, especially the first time, is like, whoa, they're 2 different gods. So again, one of the ways we fall into heresy and fall away is when we only take like 1 or 2 verses out of the Bible and throw the rest out. Right? That's called scripture twisting, where you take some. Go ahead. Oh yeah, I mean, it's very easy to do that. We want one part, we don't want the whole story. Now, interestingly, part of the problem too is that somebody makes a big mistake in the beginning of this book, and that's King Tyrion, the last king of Narnia, who is between 20 and 25, Lewis says. So we're getting a little older here, right? Maybe it's more mature. It's the 7th book, and you'll notice that the number 7 comes up a lot in this book. And Saturn is actually the 7th planet as well. This is the Saturnine story, but it's also the 7th planet. And there's even 7 friends in Narnia, lots and lots and lots. And chapter 2 is called The Rashness of the King. You understand, how is Tyrion being too rash? Let's look at a passage here and see what the centaur tells him. It's on page 676. It's the beginning of chapter 2, a couple pages in. Runewit, who's a centaur, 676. Sire, you know how long I have lived and studied the stars, for we centaurs live longer than you men, and even longer than your kind, unicorn. Never in all my days have I seen such terrible things written in the skies as there have been nightly since this year began. The stars say nothing of the coming of Aslan, nor of peace, nor of joy. I know by my art that there have not been such disastrous conjunctions of the planets for 500 years. It was already in my mind to come and warn your majesty that some great evil hangs over Narnia. But last night, the rumor reached me that Aslan is abroad in Narnia. Sire, do not believe this tale. It cannot be. The stars never lie, but men and beasts do. If Aslan were really coming to Narnia, the sky would have foretold it. If he were really come, all the most gracious stars would be assembled in his honor. It is all a lie. Do you remember? Did we read a book where the stars do announce the return of Aslan with a positive conjunction? Remember which one? Do you remember, Amanda? We see Tarva, Mars and Venus are coming together, and it promises good. Somebody watches it from a tower.
It was in the one that was, what's that one?
It was
The voyage.
No, the one before that.
The one before.
It was the one where is it Caspian?
Good, Prince Caspian. Remember when Dr. Cornelius takes him to the top of the tower? And he said, won't they run into each other? Ah, no, Lord, the lords of the sky know their dance too well for that. Right? So that was the return of, remember, it'd been 1,000 years. And that's the return of Aslan. Now, again, read the signs. One of the things that Jesus warns us is be prepared, but also read the signs. Then you'll know. And, it's really funny because a lot of people think, hey, there's wars and rumors of wars. That means Jesus is coming back tomorrow. Actually, it says there will be wars and rumors of wars, but the end does not yet come. And there will be earthquakes and famines, but the end does not yet come. So sometimes we don't actually read that properly. But we need to have eyes to see. We have to be able to read the signs.
Well, it does say that the sky will be red.
Okay, good. That's right. The end.
Yeah.
So watch out. Watch the stars. We've chosen Robert to take pictures of the stars. Your official photographer of the stars, right? A lie, said the king. What creature in Narnia or all the world would dare to lie in such a matter? And without knowing it, he lays his hand to the sword hilt. That I know not, Lord King, but I know there are liars on earth. There are none among the stars. That old idea of the stars as being perfect. And then the first time we hear the mistake. I wonder, said Jewel, whether Aslan might not come, though all the stars foretold otherwise. He is not the slave of the stars, but their master. Is it not said in the old stories that he is not a tame lion? Wow. Do you remember what Aslan said in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader when Lucy said the spell to make invisible things visible and he became visible? She said, as if anything I did could make you visible. Remember what Aslan says?
I'm here all the time.
Well, there's two things. One is that I'm here at your side all the time. And the other is, didn't you think that I would follow my own rules? In other words, God can do anything he wants, but if he sets a rule, he's going to follow his rule, because a king who breaks his own rules is a what? What we call a king. A tyrant, one way or another. A king that doesn't follow his own rules. Right? But anyway, he goes and he sees all the talking trees are being chopped down, and good Narnians are being sent as slaves into Calormen. What's going on? He doesn't understand. But he doesn't think, he's rash. And he goes in. Right? And he sees these two Calormens. And what does Tyrion do? Tyrion and Jewel do rashly. Kills them. Without warning them, without, saying, I'm your foe, raise your sword. He kills them. And he's so horrified by it, he turns himself in. Now, is there somebody in the Old Testament who rather rashly kills somebody? Think about it. See if you know. It's a very important story.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember? Oh, very good. Very good. What, can you remember the story? Well, who does Moses? It's the very beginning of Exodus.
Yeah.
Remember?
He killed the fellow Egyptian.
He killed the Egyptian.
Good. What he saw an Egyptian doing what?
Mistreating.
Good. Mistreating an Israelite.
Yeah.
Killed him, right?
Yeah.
And then like a day or so later,
It was two Israelites that was already
Yeah.
Wanted to fight, fighting each other, whatever. And then he tried to break them up, and
Yeah.
the other guy said, "Oh, what, you gonna kill me like you did that again?"
exactly, right? And then what does Moses do then? Woo! Off he goes. By the way, if you've seen the Ten Commandments, that movie makes Moses look a lot better than he does in the Bible.
Yeah.
Much better. So he runs off, but that rashness causes a lot of problems. And in some ways, he goes from one extreme to the other. First, he's overly rash in killing, and then you might say he's overly despairing in turning himself in. He should have at least told the other Narnians or said something, but he just turns himself in. And it's a gentlemanly thing to do, but maybe it's too rashly gentlemanly, right? It's like, what are you doing? And he turns himself in. And to show that he's kind of given up into despair, it's the beginning of chapter 3. Let's see, it's at page 682 near the top, towards the beginning of chapter 2. Again, we're two murderers, we're dishonored, and they keep saying to each other, 682, he's not a tame lion. You will go to your death then, said Jewel. Do you think I care if Aslan dooms me to death? That would be nothing at all. Would it not be better to be dead than to have this horrible fear that Aslan has come and is not like the Aslan we have believed in and longed for? It is as if the sun rose one day and were a black sun. Actually, one of my art students that took Narnia with me many years ago did something with that image of the black sun. It was really powerful. Something based on the last battle. Think about it. But now remember, again, Amanda, this is the Saturn book, but at the very end of this book, we break out of Saturn and we return to Jupiter. So if you want to do something like that, where we start in darkness and then the light breaks through. And by the way, this is a dark book, not just dark in terms of depressing, but it's dark. Almost everything takes place at night. We don't see any light. I guess roughly when Tyrion has his vision of our world, there seems to be a light, but it's probably a reading light. It's not the sun. We don't see any real light in this book until Tyrion goes into the stable and sees the kings and queens. That's the first time there's light. We've busted out into light. So he says, I know, or as if you drank water and it were dry water. Does anybody know what, this is like strangling me. Does anybody know what Shakespeare play begins with someone saying, foul is fair and fair is foul? You almost said it. You sound like you said Midsummer, but then you almost said the right thing. It's Macbeth. Remember the three witches? It's not the first line, but it's very close to the beginning of the play. Everything's topsy-turvy in this world. Fair is foul, and foul is fair. It's all turned around. And that corruption corrupts it. And, it does say, you might know this in the Bible where it says, in the end times, it will be so bad so that even who might be fooled. Recognize that verse? If that were possible. So that even the, starts with an E, that even the what might be fooled, if that were possible. Even the elect will be fooled. Right? And I'm sure Lewis has that in mind because these poor good creatures are fooled. Some of the bad creatures are fooled, but some of the good creatures are fooled. They don't know what to do. Right? And anyway, they drag him before the ape in his glory, right? And as they come together, let's see. Let's start on page 684, kind of in the middle of the chapter, page 684. They're all asking, Shift, but why can't we see Aslan properly and talk to him? It said, by the way, do you notice how Lewis does that often? Sometimes he uses he or she for the animals, but more often he uses it. He even uses it for Aslan a lot. It's just interesting because Lewis was very much an animal lover and was against any kind of animal experimentation, but I guess he wasn't too sentimental. He often uses it when he's talking about animals. As you see, the ape in its glory, even though it's a he. Right? By the way, how many of you thought that Ginger was a she until you realized it was a he? Did you figure that? Yeah. I mean, first of all, I grew up believing that all cats are she and all dogs are he. That's kind of how I see it. But anyway, but Ginger is actually a he. You see that there. You might think, it sounds more like a girl's name too, but of course it's because it's a ginger cat. Right?
I thought of it as a mean cat.
Just a mean cat.
Well, I kept thinking it was somehow related to the dwarves, because the leprechauns are also called gingers because they're all redheaded.
Oh, yeah, that's true. People call redheads
So I
gingers.
kept thinking somehow or another this is going to tie into those dumb dwarves, but it never did.
Yeah, I don't know how far back that phrase goes.
Paul
Because
has a very negative view of this
You're mad?
I'm still mad, yes.
You want to save those kids?
Well, I just think the whole Susan issue is a whole different thing.
It is difficult.
It's a nightmare, and so
Yeah.
it's like, it's bad news.
And the idea, I mean, remember, we don't necessarily have to read this as Susan has lost her salvation. We could say, it's more like some people, maybe they're Christian and then maybe they really reject. But other people become a Christian and then they sort of backslide. And they might still be saved, but as by fire. In other words, they might still be saved, but what fruit they would have borne has been sort of sacrificed. I mean, what is Susan's problem? It's not so much that she wants to grow up. What do you think the problem is?
Everybody in this book is having a huge crisis of identity.
In a way they are. It's kind of interesting.
Nobody's really acting right. I want to slap them all.
You got to slap them all. Get in there.
And then I think I felt like with them having sort of talked unkindly or just sort of put Susan down
Right.
in their conversations, that in the end she wasn't with them and they were all dead and she was left.
Yeah,
to
it really
carry
is bad. And,
on.
I've
just like I
yeah.
had a friend who was in that situation, her parents were killed in a plane accident, and what it does to the person as a child is just horrible.
It-
That is just a whole different growing up experience.
And when that struck me, it really upset me. I really don't think Lewis even thought about that. Because you're right. All her family has been killed. Right? Her parents, the siblings, all are dead. And we don't know what happens to Susan afterwards. But I don't think he means that. I think, because remember, all of the books are about choice, about the choices we make and how they determine it. And, again, there will be people that will just not, will turn away. I remember watching a whole special about Billy Graham's right-hand man. I can't remember his name, but he was like a big event, and then he just became an atheist. I saw an interview by Lee Strobel, and he just kind of turned away from. But it's more. Let's look at that because it's near the end. It's on page. I'll give you the page number. It's page 741. It's the very end of chapter 12. The very end of chapter 12 on page 741. And by the way, were any of you that are like really good at this when we first were introduced to the 7 friends of Narnia in the beginning and they're being described, and you're like, wait a minute, somebody's missing. I think it's Susan that's missing. What's going on? You slowly realize this, right? But if you go back, do we see any indications that of all the children, the one that would sort of give up on all might be Susan? Did you notice any indication in the earlier books, I mean?
Well, only when she's embarrassed several times by her doubt of
Good.
Aslan and of Aslan leading them, and then she has to apologize. I feel like because of her age, it was worse on her than it was, I don't know.
Maybe that's interesting. I mean, they do add a very interesting line in the movie version of Prince Caspian, where they're laying on the ground. It's like, we've come back, and Susan says, but for how long? Yeah. And that's not in the novel, but it's like she's already uncomfortable, or she doesn't want to be jerked back and forth again, or something like that. We get that sense there in the way she treats Lucy and all that. And of course, we don't really see her, but what do we learn about her in Horse and His Boy? What is the mistake Susan makes? Remember, most of the problem that they're in, the ones that are in Calormen, they're having a problem because what had Susan decided to do?
Because she decided not to marry.
Good. So at first she was going to marry Rabadesh.
Yeah.
So it kind of shows us a sort of vanity there, where she, should have seen through him, but she doesn't see till she's there. And in a weird way, she's a little bit compared to Lazarine in there. So we're seeing some indication of that. Not as much, but it is a different. Of course, you wanted to have 7, right? You need to have 7. But somebody, and some people have a problem with this, right? Because at the end of book 1, when Aslan crowns them, does anybody remember the phrase he says? Once a king or queen of Narnia, always a king or queen. And then, wait a minute, Susan's not there. And I mean, is this not the age-old issue we have of predestination and free will and all that stuff? But I remember I came upon this once, and it blew my mind. I can't say for sure if Lewis had it in mind, because I never seen it in a letter of his, but it's, if you want to look it up, it's Matthew chapter 19, verse 28. In Matthew 19:28, Jesus promises his disciples that they will sit in 12 thrones and judge the 12 tribes of Israel. Well, is that problematic?
Yeah.
Right.
Because of,
One of those thrones ain't going to be filled because it was.
one of them will be filled because the betrayed and he
Yeah, the betrayer, Judas, right? But now, of course, you know in the beginning of the book of Acts, they replace Judas with this guy, was it Matthias? They replace him with, they cast lots. But what I'm saying is still, you know, you've got that same paradox in the Bible sometimes. But here, okay, the problem, like I said, it does sound too simple. My sister Susan is no longer a friend of Narnia. Yes, said Eustace, whenever you've tried to get her to come and talk about Narnia or do anything about Narnia, she just says, what wonderful memories you have. Fancy you're still thinking about all those funny games we used to play when we were children. So what has she lost, I guess? What is Susan lost is the implication there. Kind of her innocence, yeah, there's no longer an innocent trust or a faith. Or she's, if you know the beginning of the book of Revelation, it's chapter 2 and 3, the 7 letters to the 7 churches. And the first one is Ephesus. And Jesus, it's words in red. Jesus says to the Ephesians, I'm very proud of you. You've worked hard. You fought off the heretics. You were there. But I have this one thing against you. You have what? Do you know it? You got it. You have lost your first love, forsaken your first love. Go back and do the things you did in the beginning. Maybe the implication, has she lost her first love? Unless you become like a child, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. She's lost some kind of childlike innocence, like you said, or faith. She doesn't. So it's not like they've excluded her from the meetings of the Friends of Narnia. She doesn't want to go anymore. It's like, right? And then the one that's a little bit more troubling, I think, and I think troubled Paula. Oh, Susan. She's interested in nothing nowadays except nylons and lipstick and invitations. She always was a jolly sight too keen on being grown up. Grown up indeed. I wish she would grow up. She wasted all her school time wanting to be the age she is now, and she'll waste all the rest of her life trying to stay that age. Her whole idea is to race on to the silliest time of one's life as quick as she can, and then stop there as long as she can. And again, this is the 2 most controversial things in all of Narnia, and all of Lewis, are in this book. Susan and Emmet, which we'll get to at the end of class. And it is, because I think, Paul, and maybe this is what you're feeling, is she being condemned because she wants to grow up? Is that,
Right.
it doesn't seem fair. And
Right. I mean, but in the same thing, if you take it in the same vein that I think most of Lewis's, this whole book is in too, that there's a time and place for everything. And so that in saying that, then maybe her purpose wasn't to be on that train. You know what I mean? So you can look at it as, it wasn't her time. And
Right.
So, like it was there.
And like I said, don't necessarily think of it as if she's, quote, damned. She's just lost her first love and she's given up this joy or whatever. But maybe she'll change. I don't know. If you want to, I'm not telling you to read it, but Neil Gaiman wrote a short story called Whatever Happened to Susan, and it's really disturbing. You seen it? Yeah, it's really, really disturbing. I wouldn't encourage you to read it because you won't be able to get it out of your mind. But
That's probably my problem.
yeah, maybe I know. That's maybe I need to read that. Yeah, because it's just, ooh. And it was a student who told me about it, and I scolded the student. But again, I think the most important lesson is that we have choices, right? That we can reject it. And in some ways, can we say that Susan almost gave in to the, what's the word I want, to the enchantment of the Green Witch? Remember? That's just for children, right? And she just sort of given up on that. It's like, I don't know, you were young and you were on fire for God, and then you're like, oh, I was just a holy roller back then. I don't know, something like that. And now I've got to be a serious adult, serious mother, serious father, whatever, and forsake the first love. But it is. I mean, it is true. And again, when that struck me a long time ago that, wow, she just lost her whole family, then it was really bad. And again, I really don't think Lewis had that in mind per se. I don't think he kind of worked that out. He was just thinking that there's got to be consequences to our choices. Like Lucy never having that pure friendship with that girl in Dawn Treader. That it's kind of like that. But it is troubling. And like I said, it's very controversial. A lot of people don't like the Narnia books because of what happened to Susan. But it's kind of cool. You still like which one?
I still like all of it, but it just was frustrating.
Yeah, it is. It's sad. It's like, come on, we can get them in there. Now, I mean, again, maybe as a parallel to it, though, Aslan does all he can for those dwarves in the stable, but they simply will not be helped. Right? They will not be. Just think of Jesus coming to the Pharisees, who should have been the first ones to follow him, and yet they rejected him as a whole. There were some that did. Just like there's some dwarves that come back. There's always a remnant, is the cool biblical word. There's always a remnant. Wow. I don't know. Okay. Let's look at. Okay, let's see where we should go. Again, he's going to lick you into shape. Yeah, we're back on page 684. The ape in his glory, in the middle of chapter 3. He says, "But why can't we see Aslan properly? When he used to appear in Narnia in the old days, everyone could talk to him face to face. Don't you believe it? And even if it was true, times have changed. Aslan says he's been far too soft with you before. Do you see? Well, he isn't going to be soft anymore. He's going to lick you into shape this time. He'll teach you to think he's a tame lion." And see if I turn this upside down. It makes a difference. It's like strangling me. I don't know why. Okay. I feel like I'm being a Satanist. You see? I'm turning the husky upside down. Like the upside down cross. Turn the husky. But actually, I think I'm breathing a little better. We'll see. This kind of stuff happens in cult groups. People that join cult groups that just use humiliation and terror and stuff like that. And that's when he says, "I hear some of you saying I'm an ape. Well, I'm not. I'm a man. If I look like an ape, that's because I'm so very old, hundreds and hundreds of years old. And it's because I'm so old and I'm so wise. And it's because I'm so wise and I'm the only one Aslan is ever going to speak to." Woo! Right? And then a little bit farther on, bottom of 684. No, held the beast. It can't be true. Aslan would never sell us into slavery to the king of Calorman. Quiet. You won't be slaves. You'll be paid well. Of course, all your wages will go into the public state kitty over here, right? And then what are we going to do? He says, top of 685. "There, you see," said the ape. "It's all arranged, and all for your own good. We'll be able, with the money you earn, to make Narnia a country worth living in. There'll be oranges and bananas pouring in." And of course, as we found out, nobody really likes those things except for the ape. "And roads and big cities and schools and offices and whips and muzzles and saddles and cages and kennels and prisons. Oh, everything. But we don't want all those things. We want to be free. And we want to hear Aslan speak himself." "Now, don't you start arguing. I'm a man. You're only a fat, stupid old bear. What do you know about freedom? You think freedom means doing what you like? Well, you're wrong. That isn't true. True freedom means doing what I tell you." Woo! Anybody a fan of 1984? George Orwell? If you've ever heard the motto of the state is, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. Right? Flipping everything around. From the ministry of love, with the ministry of information, twists words and twists the meaning of things and whatnot, right? Now, then something happens a little bit farther down. Suddenly, a little lamb speaks up. "Please, I can't understand. What have we to do with the Calormans? We belong to Aslan. They belong to Tash. They have a god called Tash. They say he has 4 arms and the head of a vulture. They kill men in his altar. I don't believe there's any such person as Tash, but if there was, how could Aslan be friends with him?" All the animals cocked their heads sideways, and all their bright eyes flashed towards the ape. They knew it was the best question anyone had asked yet. Now, how is Shift going to fight against this? Someone has spoken the truth. And does Shift stop this by engaging in a rational debate with the lamb? What does he do? See what he does? Baby! Silly little bleeder! Go home to your mother and drink milk. What do you understand of such things? What has he done? You see? He doesn't engage him in a debate. How does he shut him down? Belittle him. Laugh at him. Use laughter. Laugh. Yeah, you're a child. Don't actually engage the issue. Just say, yeah, you're stupid. You don't know anything. You know, you're not educated or whatever. You've seen this before. The way that Uncle Miraz treats little Caspian. I don't want you thinking anymore. Right? The way the witch says, oh, what a pretty game, but really you're too old to be playing childish games. Again, this tactic, as I said, is used in universities. You use ridicule. Listen, you. Tash is only another name for Aslan. All that old idea of us being right and the Calormans wrong is silly. We know better now. The Calormans use different words, but we all mean the same thing. Tash and Aslan are only two different names for you-know-who. And then what do they start calling him? You see the word? Tashland. This is relativism. This is moral and theological relativism, right? But you know what? If everything is equally true, then everything is equally false. Okay? They can't both be. They're mutually exclusive. Aslan and Tash can't go together. But this relativistic thinking starts to corrupt them from the inside. It's a perversion of truth. And that's when we first meet Ginger. And Ginger says, excuse me, does your friend from Calorman say the same? Especially Aslan means no more than Tash. Right? The cat realizes that neither Rishta nor the ape actually believe in either Aslan or Tash. And that's why they can so cavalierly combine them together. And then Tyrion speaks up at the end of the chapter. Ape, you lie damnably. You lie like a Calorman. You lie like an ape. Clint, did you just want to be able to say something like that? That's just really cool.
I want to say it all the time.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's just like, yeah, it's just great stuff, right? He meant to go on and ask how the terrible god Tash, who fed on the blood of his people, could possibly be the same as the good lion by whose blood all Narnia was saved. That's about as close to Christian reference as you're going to get. If he had been allowed to speak, the rule of the ape might have ended that day. The beast might have seen the truth and known the ape, thrown the ape down. But before he could, he's knocked down, and the shift says, take him away, where nobody can see him or hear him. And the truth is bottled, and Tyrion becomes a martyr. He tries to speak up to bear witness, and he's dragged off. Wow. I hope that won't be our country, but we'll see. We'll see. Now, let's stop reading things because it takes too long. Okay. Tyrion is basically chained to the tree, awaiting his execution. And isn't it cute? The little animals feed him. They're so cute. They're climbing up on each other. But why won't they untie him? Do you understand? Oh, they're scared. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's still apparently coming from Aslan. They're believers, but they're fooled. And it's so easy to be fooled. And again, that this is all the internal rot that's setting inside of Narnia. And then during the night, Tyrion starts to become meditative. You see, when Saturn, shines down on you, it makes you heavy and melancholy and brings disease, but it can also make you into a sort of contemplative or a mystic. If you receive it right, just like Mars can make you a soldier or a martyr, but it can also make you a tyrant, like Miraz. Here, he becomes a contemplative. And it's as if, while he's chained, he starts running the whole Bible through his mind. He surveys the sacred history of Narnia. And as he starts doing that, he discovers a pattern. Whenever Narnia is in trouble, what happens?
The kids arrive.
Good. The kids, together with Aslan, they seem to go together in one way or another. Sometimes Aslan comes later, the kids come earlier, but he's like, wait a minute, I'm starting to see it. Just like if you study Genesis and you start noticing the story of Cain and Abel, I think it's true with them too, but Isaac and Ishmael, Jacob and Esau, Joseph and his brothers, which one does God keep privileging over? Good, the younger. This is weird. This doesn't happen in a traditional society where the older son's the most important one. But again and again in Genesis, God keeps privileging the younger son over the older. And I would say it culminates when he chooses Israel, which in a sense is the youngest son of the nations. Right? So that's a pattern. Right? It leads up to David when the little one is chosen. We said before, God does not see as man sees. Man sees the outside, God sees the heart. He, the same way, suddenly has an insight into history, the sacred history of Narnia. And he says, Aslan, if you won't come, if you can't come, whatever, please send the children. And he calls out to them, and he arrives during a meeting, the seven. Is that a meeting of the seven here? Minus Lupe and Anthony. Anthony said he's going to take the class, so keep an eye on him. We'll get him there. We'll get him back.
No, he'll take it all out.
He won't be here, but at least he'll be in the class. We'll see. We'll drag him back in. We'll send someone in a gorilla suit.
Us in a rowboat.
Oh man, we have to dress somebody up as a gorilla, pick him up, and carry him to class. See if they're gonna do it.
Are you saying he's an ass?
That was from Paula. Oh, Anthony, when Paula makes fun of you, you're in trouble, man. That's like when Mom makes fun of you, you're in trouble. Oh, man, I tell you. You have not made the first joke. You have only been the first joke. She's taking it back. She's taking it back. Oh, man. So and by the way, when he does pray, I'll just read it to you because this is really cool about prayer. He says, "Let me be killed," cried the king. "I ask nothing for myself, but come and save all Narnia." And still there was no change in the night or the wood, but there began to be a kind of change inside Narnia. Isn't that how prayer sometimes works? Prayer doesn't change our outward circumstance. What does it change? It changes the heart inside. Right? It changes us within. And Lewis did a lot of writing about prayer, a lot of essays. He didn't write a book on prayer, but a lot of essays and chapters are about prayer. Okay, now, I think I might have said this to you before, that remember that Narnia and the earth run on totally different time schemes. So there is no formula. 1 year is 100 years or something. But every other time we've read, it's always been a short period passes on the earth and a long period passes in Narnia. I don't know if you noticed it, but this is the only time when it's reversed, right? Because Tyrion prays to the children and sees them, the seven friends, and then he wakes up in the morning, it's like whatever, a couple hours later, and Eustace and Jill are there. But for them, it's been like a week. Because remember, they tried to they wanted to go back and dig up the rings, and they got on the train and all that sort of stuff. So it's the only time where the time in Narnia was shorter than the time in the earth. That'd be a great trivia question to win Trivial Pursuit with, wouldn't it? So that's for real Narnia nerds, that they have to know everything. Yeah. You played a trivia game like that? It's good stuff.
Whoever wins trivia gets in.
What did they get? Yeah, we'll have to come up with a prize. We'll have to come up with a prize. Maybe we'll put Clinton in one of those dunk tanks. You can throw the ball.
I think we put Amanda in the dunk tank.
Oh, there we go.
I think a lot more people want to.
And don't say what you're thinking about that. I know you're thinking about that.
Okay. You're starting to read his thoughts. That may be dangerous. Okay, let's just jump all the way up to the place where it really gets crazy, and that is let's see. Turn all the way to page 706. This is chapter 7, very beginning of chapter 7, on page 706 at the top. Mainly about dwarves. Okay. Now they've rescued Puzzle, right? Good old Jill goes in there and rescues him and takes him in. and they come upon a chain gang. Right? The dwarves are all chained together like prisoners, and they're being taken down to Calormen to work in the mines. And they show up, right? And Tyrion basically says, "Unhand them," right? And then Tyrion kills the Calormens. But what is he doing different this time that he didn't do in chapter 2 when it was bad? If you notice, let me just show, because it is an important thing. It's good. He announces himself, right? He is a true knight. It's just like you've seen the old swashbuckler movies. If I'm the good guy and Clinton's the bad guy, and we're fighting, and while we're fighting, I knock the sword out of Clinton's hand, what do I do before I continue the fight? Good, I give you your sword back. And then we fight, and then my sword drops, and of course Clinton comes right at me, right? That's the difference between the good guy and the bad guy, right? So this time he announces it, which is supposed to. And that's on the top of page 706. The chief says, "Give the password." What's the password? What's the key so I know you're one of us? "This is my password," said the king. "The light is dawning, the lie broken. Now guard thee, miscreant, for I am Tyrion of Narnia." Now prepare. What is it? You killed my father, prepare to die.
You killed my father, prepare to die.
Over and over again. Stop saying that! Stop saying that. I love it again.
This word is not meaning what you think it means.
Shaking her head. I love it.
I love that guy.
That guy's he pops up in a lot of movies.
That I knew that you would know that I would know that I would think that the poison was in front of me. So therefore, I cannot know what you know that I know that you know that he knew that I would do that. So, the poison has got to be mine.
One of the two things you should never do. Never fight a land war in Asia, and never go toe-to-toe with a Sicilian when death is on the line, or something like that, he says, right? So they fly upon him and start killing them, right? Now, look what happens. They do it, and then it says, that short paragraph, "But the dwarves had settled the 2 remaining Calormens. There was no enemy left." There's no external enemy left. But look what happens. "Well struck, Eustace," cried Tyrion. "Now, dwarves, you are free. Tomorrow I will lead you to free all Narnia. 3 cheers for Aslan." We're all excited. But the result which followed was simply wretched. There was a feeble attempt from a few dwarves, about 5, which died away all at once. From several others there were sulky growls. Many said nothing at all. "Don't they understand?" said Jill impatiently. "What's wrong with all you dwarves? Don't you hear what the king says? It's all over. The ape isn't going to rule Narnia any longer. Everyone can go back to ordinary life. You can have fun again. Aren't you glad? This should be happiness." Watch what happens. After a pause of nearly a minute, a not very nice-looking dwarf with hair and a beard as black as soot. Have we ever met a dwarf with a black beard? With black hair before? As opposed to a red dwarf?
No, what's his name?
Trumpkin's the red dwarf, and who's the black dwarf?
The one that chose the white witch.
Good. Nickabrick, the evil Nickabrick. He's the one that's got the black beard and black hair. Right? So this is of the same group, whatever. Okay. "And who might you be, missy?" "I'm Jill, the same Jill who rescued King Rilian from the enchantment. And this is Eustace who did it too, and we've come back from another world after hundreds of years. Aslan sent us." "Well, I don't know how all you chaps feel, but I feel I've heard as much about Aslan as I want to for the rest of my life." "That's right, all the trick, all the blooming trick." What's going on here? What's going on here with the dwarves? "You must think we're bloomin' soft in the head, that you must," said Griffle. "We've been taken in once, and now you expect us to be taken in again the next minute. We've no more use for stories about Aslan. See, look at him, an old moke with long ears." Can somebody finish this famous saying? "Fool me once, shame on you. Shame on me." Okay? There we go. That's exactly. You're not going to fool me. It was fooled once. I won't be fooled again.
Fall for the man in the tailpipe.
Wait a minute. You're going to have to identify that.
Eddie Murphy.
Oh, Eddie, wait, from
Beverly Hills Cop.
Beverly Hills Cop. Yeah.
Hey,
Roxy.
fall for the man in the tailpipe.
That's funny. Oh my gosh. So, what happens? Okay, they believed and they're fooled, and now they'll never believe again. Have you? Maybe this happened to you or a friend of yours who was like a real committed church person, and then their church went through a split, or maybe there was a sex scandal. The pastor, or more likely the youth pastor, if it was a younger person.
Hey, I was
Yeah.
always happened to you, Pastor.
I know it's the same, but yeah, there we go. And what often happens to that person that goes through that? Is there some? Did
It's so true.
did you go to this church? Right? What sometimes happens to that person's faith, though? Let's say they were like really, really committed, and then there's a scandal. And what do?
They back off the plane, they're done.
That's it. It's like they give up and they decide after that now all Christians are what? They're all bad. They're all hypocrites. I can't trust anybody. Now, of course, you know what often happens to that person? They come away thinking every Christian's a hypocrite except me, right? But it's hard to, and that's why it's you don't want to overly shield your kids, so they don't think everything's perfect and every person's always honest and whatnot. And then sometimes when they really think that, one person lets them down, and sometimes they'll spring back, and they might come back later. But this is what happens. Again, Paula, you remember the 1980s, all the televangelist scandals?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
it's still going on.
they're still going on, but that was, because it was, for a while, there was, people were growing, there's lots of revivals, and then there was just a bunch of...
Well, the difference is back then, when they went through the scandals, they was like, no more on TV, you know what I'm saying? Like everyone turned their back on. Nowadays, they back on air the next day.
Oh, they're back, that's right. Oh.
Nobody perfect.
Oh, I know.
Let me go at it again. Let me preach about marriage some more.
Oh, man.
And
Terrible.
Like, are you serious? Because back then, I mean, at least
You're right, at least there was
back
a
in the 80s.
cooling off period.
At least you could say back in the 80s.
This is the 80s, and I'm down with the ladies.
At least you could say
I
back
heard that
then,
one.
People as a whole at least took Christianity a lot serious.
No, that's
to
a
the
good
point
point.
that if you was in a scandal, they're like, you know what, you're not real. We don't
You're
want
not
you.
real.
Right.
Well, nowadays it's like, hey, it's okay.
Well,
So,
and I
put it
think
back.
the thing is social media has softened, I think, our reactions to things.
Social media and the preaching nowadays, like we were saying, how they
Right. And so, like, because the
Chicken
very
Fingers.
first ones were like Tammy Faye and
Right.
Jim Baker.
Yeah, and then swagger.
Jimmy Swaggart.
Yeah,
Oral
and
Roberts.
that whole family's a
And
mess.
if I was
And,
preaching, I would change my name to Swagger.
Swagger.
He was known for
Not
his,
Swagger.
He was Swaggart.
I know, it sounds like braggart. I know.
Yeah, Jerry Lewis's first cousin, Mickey Gilly's second cousin, and quite an interesting family. They all married.
Swagger Millsap.
That's you.
I'm preaching.
You mean Jerry Lewis as in Jerry Lee Lewis, the singer,
Jerry
not
Lee
like
Lewis
Dean
is-
Martin and Jerry Lewis.
No,
Okay,
Jerry
not the comedian.
Lee Lewis,
Really? Yeah.
he married his
Piano player?
13-year-old
Yes, that's
cousin.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Really
was
great
it?
guy.
He was like, incest is the best.
I got to
Well,
play the piano he played on, right? When you go to
he got
to
arrested.
Nashville.
He was wanted in Louisiana for that, and then never went back to Louisiana.
They have a cable television station now.
The
The
Swagger.
Swagger family.
Are you serious? Oh my!
My mom swears by it. Like, dude, like you serious? She like, oh, I love him.
They're talking about the Lord word, baby.
They sound like that. One sounds just like that. You could be on there. You can
I
see
know,
that.
we're gonna see Clinton on there, and he is.
Listen,
cool.
listen.
Like you.
Listen, when I think I was 4, turning, what's kindergarten to first grade? What is that age?
5 to 6. 5 to 6.
5, 6?
Yeah.
So, I lived with my godparents from age 5 to 6. Okay, so my first years of going to school, I lived with my godparents, and I went from living in like an apartment to living in a house, but I went to all black school and an all black church, and I had no idea because I'm 5 turning 6. I have no idea
What's going on?
what anything is. I don't know any of it. I don't realize that there's a difference to anything. But my first experience in church is all black Baptist church.
Oh wow!
where everyone's jumping up and everyone's praising and everyone's dancing and you preaching and it's like a whole lot of, yes, Mom! Yes, it is! And so the first time I ever go to a Catholic church, I was just sitting there like, this is miserable.
Oh, no, it's like nothing's happening.
There was no dancing. Half of it you couldn't understand.
This was in Latin.
There was get up, get down, get up, get down. You had to be super quiet. You know what I mean? There was no celebrating. The choir didn't do anything, but there was just humming by the, they had the things, and I was just like, and honestly, at like 7 or 8, the first thing that went through my mind was, what in the hell is this? I've never uttered those words out loud. But my inner monologue was like, because I had, the first experience of church, those were my churches, and then I go to, I go back and my mom takes me to, she's like, we're gonna go to church today. And I'm like, oh, sweet.
Oh my gosh.
We go to Catholic church.
Which type of church?
Yeah, we go to mass, and I'm like, what? It was in my head, what in the hell is this? And then I had not ever remembered blessing myself with holy water on the way out.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so there was holy water on either side of the door, and people are dipping their finger in it, and then they're blessing themselves when they're going out.
Right.
And all I see is all these dirty old men and women like put their fingers in the water, and I'm walking with my mom, and she like puts her finger in one and like does the sign of the cross, and she's like, okay, you too. And I'm like, no. I'm like, that water's filthy.
Oh, man.
You know what I mean?
Trouble child. I love
Because
it.
what I had for the past 2 years was, don't put your finger in that, baby. That's nasty, baby. So for me, I'm like, I'm not touching it. So I go to Catholic church the first time ever, takes me out, and I get a spanking in the parking lot. And then so like a few weeks later, someone's like, they're like, so are you Baptist? Are you Catholic? Are you Pentecostal? Are you this or that? And I was like, oh, I am a Baptist. Like, no, never ever. So anyway, that was my rejection of the Catholic Church was caused by these things.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Evening at the Improv with Clinton Millsap. He'll be here every Wednesday for the next month, right? It's like, hey, this is good stuff, man. You guys are getting a lot here.
So when I tell Chris that I know the response, I know.
But you didn't see it in the Blues Brothers when they go to the black church and the people start jumping and they're reaching the ceiling and coming down. I love that scene in the Blues Brothers. Ooh, up and down. Anyway, but I mean, this happens though. It's the false Christ ends up causing everybody to despair, and then you just stop. You go from being overly believing in anything to believing in nothing and to being a hypocrite. And look at what poor Tyrion does. He says, oh, look at me, he's an old moke with long hair. By heaven, you make me mad. Which of us said that was Aslan? That is the ape's imitation of the real Aslan. Can't you understand? Ah, and you got a better imitation, I suppose. No, thanks. We've been fooled once, and we're not going to be fooled again. I have not. I serve the real Aslan. Where is he? Who is he? Show him to us. Do you think I keep him in my wallet, fools? Who am I that I could make Aslan appear at my bidding? He's not a tame lion. Oh, you can just see him putting his hand like, that was the wrong thing to say. And then he says, hey, that tame lion, back and forth, right? And he says, come on, Jill said, I've seen him. He has sent us to her out of a different world. Ah, so you say. They've taught you your stuff all right, saying your lessons, ain't you? Churl, will you give a lady a lie to her very face? You like that? He stands up for the lady. Now, Clinton would do that, right? See? He stands up for her. You keep a civil tongue in your head, missy. I don't think we want any more kings. If you are Tyrion, which you don't look like him. Does anybody understand why it just said you don't look like Tyrion? You may have forgotten that they're like in blackface, okay? They've put oil on their skin to look like Calormans. Yeah, I know. I mean, it's not exactly. It's more brown face than blackface, I guess you would say. But yeah. Yeah, it's like, oh, I know. It sounds kind of bad now. I guess maybe the best way to say it, grease paint, like the circus or something like that. They take it off with oil and water. But they're trying to look more like Arabs, I guess we would say, really. And look what they're saying. He says, no more than we want in the Aslands. We're going to look after ourselves from now on and touch our caps to nobody. See? That's right. We're on our own now. No more Aslan, no more kings, no more silly stories about other worlds. The dwarves are for the dwarves. Wow. And that will continue right to the end of the book, when during the last battle itself, the dwarves start killing everybody on both sides. Oh, did anybody want to strangle them when they started shooting the Narnian horses? They're going to kill them. You can see that. But they've given up. They've given in to, some people call this a council of despair. They've lost all their faith, and now they've become pure cynics. And he's like, aren't you even going to thank us? Thank you. You wanted to make use of us. That's why you rescued us. You're playing some game of your own. Come on, you chaps, let's get out of here. So, and this can happen to people. I'm sure you've all met people that have just accepted cynicism and they no longer believe that anybody has pure motives. Everybody's out to get everybody else. And you know, that may be more true today in politics, but it wasn't always that true. It wasn't that true when I was growing up. Maybe there were a few bad ones, but it wasn't like every single person is out for themselves. Right? We've really gone over, and it's probably not even true right now that everybody does, but it seems like it, right? We've given up. It's a shame. And off they go, right? And it says in the middle of page 708, a little bit farther ahead, Tyrion had never dreamed that one of the results of an ape setting up a false Aslan would be to stop people from believing in the real one. Wow. Watch out for that. But are all the dwarves bad? See what happens? A little bit farther, a couple paragraphs. One of them comes back. Only me, sire, me, Pug and the dwarf. I've only just managed to get away from the others. I'm on your side, sire, and on Aslan's. If you could put a dwarfish sword in my fist, I'd gladly strike a blow on the right side before all is done. And my axe is what he should say. Lord of the Rings. Get it ready for next semester. Does that remind you of one of the healing miracles? Yep. Jesus heals some people. You remember? 12 what? Lepers, right. Only one comes back. None of them come back to say thank you. Yeah. That happens. People don't say thank you. So it's amazing. You know? No gratitude there. But he comes back and he joins them. And then we start learning about Ginger the cat. And let's turn a little bit ahead to...
That was weird. The way that all of a sudden the cat just appears and he starts talking about the cat.
Yeah.
It was odd to me because everyone else had like a really kind of progressive introduction.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's just like, boom, Ginger the cat.
It's just there. I mean, we saw her back in chapter 3 or something. But yeah, there's always going to be one that's going to take advantage of it, that's going to see through it all and join that side, right? And this is on page 710, a couple more pages. It says, and I think Paula mentioned this. It's more a question by now, sire, if the ape is in his counsels, replied the dwarf. The ape was taken to drinking, you see. My belief is that the plot is now mostly carried on by Ginger or Rishta, the Calorman captain. And there's a wonderful dialogue between the two. And just for Clinton, because this is our last class, I've worked this up, because these are two good voices. So look a little bit farther down where it says, and these two were Ginger and Rishta Tarkhan, as they call him. So we're on page 710. We're almost the end of chapter 8. Last couple paragraphs of chapter 8. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Last couple of chapters of chapter 7. Last couple of paragraphs of chapter 7. Middle of page 710. And these two were Ginger and Rishta Tarkhan, as they called him. Noble Tarkhan, I just wanted to know exactly what we both meant today about Aslan meaning no more than Tash. Doubtless, most sagacious of cats, you have perceived my meaning. You mean that there's no such person as either. All who are enlightened know that. Then we can understand one another? Do you, like me, grow a little weary of the ape? A stupid, greedy brute, but we must use him for the present. Thou and I must provide for all things in secret, make the ape do our will. And it would be better, wouldn't it, to let some of the more enlightened Narnians into our councils, one by one as we find them apt. For the beasts who really believe in Aslan may turn at any moment, and will if the ape's folly betrays his secret. But those who care neither for Tash nor Aslan, but have only an eye to our own profit, and such reward as the Tisroc may give them when Narnia is a Koloman province, will be firm. Excellent cat, but choose which ones carefully. That's for Clinton. Working on these voices.
Well done.
The cat, but you see, you see how the cat knows that the ones who don't believe anything are the ones that we can control. The ones who really believe, they may turn at any moment, because they may suddenly realize that you've been lying, and the real Aslan is, and they'll turn right away. You want to get the cynics on your side who will go whichever way the wind blows, who are only in it for profit. Because there are a lot of good people that, if they woke up, they would throw off the bad guys, but they've been lulled into sleep. Right? So remember all these things. I mean, this commentary is even true today.
I felt like after reading that C.S. Lewis hates cats.
Yeah,
Just
but
like that. And so,
you would think, but he's actually a pet lover. He was. He had both cats and dogs.
I just sort of felt like the cat at that point becomes the manipulator.
Yeah.
And is even running the Kalorman.
He,
So,
well, who would he be? Who would he be of Hitler's henchmen? You know, the people that served Hitler. You ever heard of a guy named Herr Goebbels? Herr Goebbels was the propaganda minister for Hitler. And that's kind of what Ginger's become, the propaganda minister to spread the lies and the poison and all. But I mean, it does fit in with the image, the archetype of a cat.
absolutely.
You know. So, but he had actually cats and dogs for pets at the kilns where he lived. So he was an animal lover. And he does get their personality pretty well. You know, the dogs in this book are really doggy, right? And the horses are really horsey and stuff like that. He does a good job with it. Right? And then Tash comes in. Ooh, watch out if you call on the devil, he just may come. We were talking before about Ouija boards and the danger of that. Watch out. Watch out what you might call into it. I'm here. You've called me. Now what are you going to do? Right? We didn't really think of it that way. I didn't really think ahead. You know? It reminds me, Clinton, you'll enjoy this. This is a true story. I went to Colgate University in upstate New York, kind of like Rice, and there was, it was kind of early days in feminism and stuff, and there was a group of girls that were really mad because you get these fraternity guys that will whistle at the girls or something like that. So they said, we're going to show these guys their own medicine. Right? We're going to fight fire with fire. So these girls stood on the street, the fraternity row, and the guys came by and they're like, woo, they're whistling at them. And you know what happened? The guys came up and said, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Oh, no, we didn't mean that. It was the funniest thing. I remember that. It's like, wait a minute, that's what's supposed to happen.
They're pretty simple.
They're pretty simple, I know. I just thought that was so funny. It really happened. But, again, they've called him and he has come, okay? Don't call for demons unless you want to actually meet one. They are.
I'll play that.
Don't play. Don't do. Paula, did anybody when you were a kid want to do a seance? I remember a few people I knew wanting to, call back the dead kind of thing.
Yeah. And so, yes, they did, but they're always stupid. They had their older brothers or somebody.
Oh, but pretend,
scare
yeah.
us, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So,
It's silly, but I remember people doing that.
I don't know. It's sort of like the Ouija board. I only think you're in charge of how much power it actually has.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. I mean, and same with all that business. I'm not a big.
Yeah, you don't surrender yourself to it. That's the thing.
Never.
Yeah, and that's the danger.
Anywhere in the same room.
It's just not. I mean, yeah.
Never touched the Ouija board. Never did the. My cousins tried to do the Bloody Mary thing.
Yeah, what about?
Oh, you see it.
I
That's
dragged
what
them out of the bathroom by their collars.
there we go. Get out.
Like, y'all
Because
lost your damn
same
mind.
with that thing that light as a feather, stiff as a board.
Uh-huh.
My daughter did that.
Yeah.
If I put their two fingers.
Oh, right.
Well,
Levitation,
yes,
right.
and so this poor girl, we were like, okay, you do it. Let's see if this really works. And so she was a little heavy. Nothing happened.
Look, baby, you think.
See, this is bad news. Doesn't work. And so it's like one of the poor thing that had a complex the rest of that
Oh
whole.
no.
But yes, it was a spin night. It was horrible. And so anyway.
Wow.
But it was like,
Keep telling the story. heard
because the
tidbits of
girls are
information. There's
about
more to this.
Oh, okay.
12 is not pretty. I'm just going to say that. It's about really 12. And it's just not a good scene to ever have anything that mentions any physical something wrong with them.
Oh, right.
So,
It never goes well. And even if it's not meant in any way.
yeah, I wore husky jeans. And I had conflicts about, I mean, they were like Tuss's boards, you know what I mean?
Wrangler.
No, they were called husky.
Husky.
They were
Oh,
called
husky.
Yeah, they were like,
more high quality.
they're like super hardcore blue jean material.
Oh,
You
right.
weren't going to rip the knees.
No,
You know,
Really?
Really, if you fell on the ground or
Yeah, I
anything
mean-
of them, no.
They were made for rough and tumbler chunky boys.
And they were made to last.
Well, they were made to last.
God, there was a time when they made things to last. That time is past.
American made.
Today it's called, there's a word for it, planned obsolescence. They make it to break.
Yeah.
Usually to break one day after the
coffee
warranty's
machines.
over. Yeah.
The coffee machines are made to break.
And nobody fixes anything anymore. You just buy something new. Sometimes it's cheaper to buy a new thing than try to, get that kind of stuff. Yeah, I get it. Oh, yeah. It used to be they would give you the printer so cheap, and then you didn't realize that every month you had to buy another cartridge that cost you more than the printer. It's like, oh, man. Never buy an inkjet. Just spend the money and buy a laser, which is you can get a laser for $100, and then the printer, the ink lasts for a long, long time. So it's much better. But okay, so I don't know if you noticed this, but they're like, why are things always, bad in Narnia? Well, it's like, well, the children are called to Narnia only when Narnia is in danger. But there were long, centuries of peace and plenty, and it's wonderful, and they're all talking about that. But do you notice how we do that? We break up time into like wars and bad things, like World War I and World War II and the Civil War, or something we think of time in terms of all the bad things. But why not think about the good things, right? We need to realize that all worlds come to an end, except Aslan's country. And maybe that's something America needs, because we think we're going to live forever, right? That all worlds come to an end. Nothing will go on. Nothing gold can stay. Nothing will go on forever. And we see Runewith the centaur dead with an arrow in his side. Right? All worlds end. Sad. And then they go on. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed it, but the way I interpret this whole book takes place in about, not the whole book, but most of the book takes place in a few seconds of Earth time. Because it seems to me when the accident happened, in the second before they died, it seems like Eustace and Jill were transported to Narnia. And all of this, almost all the book is taking place in that heartbeat before they actually die and they're in Aslan's country. It's kind of a weird moment there. It's all suspended.
Jill and Eustace really died then? 'Cause we
Well-
were sort of talking about this.
Well, ultimately, they're obviously dead. Yeah, that's a good point. Did they die because they died in the train wreck? Or did they die because they were killed in the last battle? It seems like, again, for the second before they actually died, they were transported to Narnia to help Tyrion. And then the train wreck happened, and all of them ended up in the stable. Is what it seems like, because they're all together there. So it's like it's a heartbeat. It's all caught in a heartbeat, which is kind of a neat idea. Time and eternity and things. You look skeptical there.
Well,
Do you buy it?
no, this part is ruined for me because I stopped on chapter 8.
Oh, okay. Well, it's okay. It's good. Not too many. Not too many
Got
spoilers.
as far as I could.
Not too many spoilers. If you look at the beginning of chapter 10 is called "Who Will Go into the Stable?" You've got that great picture of Rishta Tarkon going like that. Both the Nazis and the Soviets really were into this kind of propaganda. Like you've heard of the Nuremberg rallies, and Lenin and Stalin had similar rallies like that. Big marches and getting everybody in there and sort of losing their individuality. And I mean, this is the kind of stuff he's dealing with. But he's also playing, Lewis, on the old mystery plays that they used to put on in the Middle Ages. And I was so lucky when I was I got to study in England in 1985 and be in London. And by the way, anybody here a fan of The Crown? They just started the new season on network. It's really, really good. And it's pretty historically accurate, too. They did season 4. Well, it's all there now. Season 4, and they're up to the part with Lady Diana, which is like, I remember that because that was in the 80s. And I remember because I went to school just afterwards, and there was always a look-alike Lady Diana girl in the class, right? There was like some girl in the class that looked like Diana and stuff like that, and had that little pixie haircut. Anyway, but anyway, while I was in London, I got to watch the mystery plays remade in this experimental theater. And they would actually do that sometimes. They would have a play on the Last Judgment. And there would be something that looked like a giant hole that the people would go into. The dam would go into there and over there, right? And so those on the right, and I'm sorry, the goats on the left, right? And Aslan's shadow goes over the left, and all of the bandits and rookies are taken into the hellmouth. Sorry, you're on the left there today. The bird lover is over here. You're okay. But these two, that's right. You're on the right side this time. You're on the right time. Maybe you knew. Maybe you saw what was coming. You were smart, right? But here, they're drawn into his left. But I don't know if you've ever heard, during the Middle Ages, they always talked about the 4 last things. It's in the beginning of the church. And those are death, judgment, hell, and heaven. And we sort of get a glimpse of all of them at the end. I mean, Lewis is playing out not only the book of Revelation, but a sort of medieval mystery play where they would put on plays about the last judgment. And it would be very much pageant-oriented and things like that. Right? And it's funny because that was more a Catholic thing to have pageants, but First Baptist was famous for doing them. I mean, I don't know if they do it anymore, but during Christmas time, they would put on and they would have real sheep. Yeah. It was amazing what they would do. I never, did anybody ever see that live? You did see it live. I saw it on TV, but.
Yeah, no, we went several times, and it was wonderful.
It's really neat.
I mean, and because it starts off, the pageant that with all the animals is at the end, and they start off always with the sort of younger, more contemporary dance and Christmas celebration.
Okay.
And to sort of show the talent of their congregation and everything. And so it's a pretty big theatrical production, sort of like what Second Baptist does.
Wow.
Similar. And
We've lost it. That was a big deal. Yeah, we've lost the pageantry. Were any of you in a pageant? You ever play a wise man or something? Did you get to be married when you were little?
No,
Angel?
I was in the Turkey Trot in Clare, Texas.
What's that?
The last of the great pageants, celebrating them being the turkey capital of the world.
Oh my gosh.
You were the turkey queen?
I was not the turkey queen. I was Josephine Bonaparte.
Bonaparte. Very good.
I have so many comments.
Yeah, I had this giant dress on. I was little bitty and real young, and oh my God, you had to walk for miles in the parade.
Oh my
that took
gosh.
you up to where the grand staircase was at this big set they had built in the
Was you
city
holding
park.
a turkey leg?
No, I wasn't holding a turkey leg. But it was very, grand as far as things like that goes. They have all the stories and everything else. It was very
That's
interesting.
awesome.
Hey, by the way, I was putting together the syllabus for Lord of the Rings, and I was very careful to space it better. Because I remember I didn't give you enough time between oral presentation 1 and 2, so it's really nicely spaced. After 4 weeks, another 4 weeks, I was able to work it out with the MLAs and stuff. So you won't get rushed. So I was thinking about you guys. But the
I kind of feel like last time I probably rushed into scheduling your class, and I kind of feel like this time I haven't registered yet.
I think you're doing that.
well, get in there.
I'm kind of wondering, maybe we should work something out with Dr. Marcos.
That's right.
So that we do register. I mean, I'm just saying,
It's good stuff, man.
if I were to not register, what would happen? But if I were to register,
Okay, Shane.
what would happen? So, in
Shift.
this hand
It's shift.
In this hand I had nothing, and then this hand I had something, and this would be me registering.
Yeah,
What would be here?
I'm gonna give you a banana.
That's right.
That's the 8, huh?
That's the aim. It's shift. Hey, you've got to be here just to make life difficult for the bandit and the rookie. The bandit.
Yeah, you're not actually wearing a bandit.
That's right. You're not bandit today.
Very leathery.
Actually, you're a cheetah girl today.
You're a cheetah
Girl.
girl. That is pretty Oh, it's the cheetah girl.
Oh.
And his leopard skin, okay.
Oh,
That was the Cheetah Girls. That's what my daughter watched growing up. The Cheetah Girls on Disney
yeah,
Channel.
I got all that.
That was fun. You saw that? Raven?
That was faithful.
Oh, did you like that? Yeah, they were good shows, actually. They were pretty good. Okay, so again, look at chapter 10, page 725. Again, they're putting on these elaborate charade. They're trying to fool everybody, and they basically, Ginger comes forward and says, "Hey, look what some terrible person has done. They've taken a donkey and dressed him up as Aslan. Evil." See, just use a little bit of the truth to make the lie even greater. And we have another one of these scenes with the ape and stuff like that. And the bear is speaking up against him, right? Come on, let us into the stable. And the bear, this is the middle of 725, just 2 pages in. "I don't quite understand all this," it grumbled. "I thought you said you thought, as if anyone could call what goes on in your head thinking. Listen, you others, anyone can see Tashland, but he's not coming out. You got to go in and see him." And they just keep shifting back and forth, and it becomes, and you know, a young child reading this book would have a little hard time following it. I mean, it gets pretty complex with all the stuff that goes on in the stable. I mean, it gets complex, and I think he needs it to be.
Yeah, it was jumpy.
Yeah.
It was jumpy, right? It was like,
It's weird, and when what's happening in the stable and all, but it's got one of the great lines where we find out Lucy, Lucy says it later on about the stable. Is it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. Is there a Harry Potter reference for that? Because she was a big fan of Narnia books, J.K. Rowling. I don't remember which book it was. I saw the movie. In Harry Potter, do you remember when they go to the like national Quidditch match, and they're all there staying in tents? Remember? And the inside of the tent is like a mansion. Remember that? I haven't read the book. I saw the movie, but I think it's the same. But she probably had this in mind. I read the first novel. I said that was enough. I just watched all the movies. But who has time to read all this other stuff? Just got in there.
Pick and choose, huh?
Yeah, well, so it was okay, but it's like I can watch this. I might go back. I mean, it's like I'm not going to read all these things. I'm not going to read The Hunger Games. I just watched it once. But what I was saying that. Oh yeah.
are you going to start confessing all the books you have not read? You can continue a confessional. I would like it.
I don't. Your professor doesn't have to read Harry Potter, do they?
No.
Okay, I read the first one. I read the first one just because I had to find out why all the Christians were so upset. And I'm like, come on, there's no reason to be upset about these books. There are ultimately they're Christian books, not like this, but they're books that are set within a moral universe of good and evil. I mean, it is a Christian world, in fact, her understanding of evil is very, very Christian Augustinian. Evil is a perversion of good, like it is in these books too, or like it is in Lord of the Rings. So she's writing within the tradition. And I remember somewhere I heard her say when she was interviewed that she can't be in a room with a Chronicle of Narnia and not just start reading it. Like if she's in a library, she's got to start reading it. So you can see the influence of the two on there. Now, if you want to read Narnia and Harry Potter on what would you say on I can't even think what I'm saying anymore. But if you want the Game of Thrones version, there's a series called The Magicians. If you've heard of that, on hormones. That's the word I wanted. If you want, yes, on hormones. Anyway, but it was interesting. One of my students got me to read the first one, but it's just crazy teenagers. But okay, so I was like, I can't breathe in this mask.
I've been doing this.
Oh, so is it maybe the weather? Because this wasn't.
Well, there's all that smoke in the air today.
Oh, is that why? Because I wore this, at graduation, and it didn't bother me. But now it's like, I thought maybe because I washed it and it's like coming apart or something. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. But it's like it's strangling me. Okay. And I can't take it off. And even if I wanted to take it off, I'm taping myself. I can't.
Yeah.
I'm going to incriminate myself.
We got an email that there's cameras everywhere.
Oh, really? Oh, I wouldn't doubt it. Did it really? Did you actually?
Yes, but I just don't know that.
Look,
The
there it is.
studios will be open, but
Oh my gosh.
Cameras everywhere, so
those are
leave
the
your
stuff
mask
you-
on. And I just-
What you have to do is make a mask that looks like your face. So
Yeah.
people get used to it, and then you take it off, and they don't know the difference. Yeah, so anyway.
I have to save my ass.
Oh, when the cat's away, the mice will play. Yep, they are. Watch out for them. Oh, my. So, anyway, I'll just say a few things that happens. So, again, go in the stable. And again, the reason for Harry Potter is the inside of those tents is bigger than the outside. Well, here, the inside of the stable is bigger than the outside. And Lucy says, yes, in our world, a stable once held something that was bigger than the whole world, right?
Wow.
She's talking about the Christ child, which is kind of neat, right? But, okay, so they've got it all set. There's a Calorman soldier inside the stable. And if one of the bad guys goes in, they'll let them in and go out. But if one of the, Narnians goes, he'll get killed. So Ginger's going to go first. And goes into Ginger. And what happens to Ginger when she sees Tash? I keep saying she.
It's a
He.
regular old cat.
That's right. And what, do you remember what Aslan told them in The Magician's Nephew?
It was at the very beginning when they
Yeah.
were making it that I'm making you like this, but if you misbehave, basically, and go against me, you will become a regular cat,
Good.
a regular
Back to
animal.
that. A dumb animal, no longer a talking animal. And it's kind of neat that he does this, because I don't know if you guys are aware of this, if you get into these kind of debates, but there's a lot of Christians now who have argued that hell is not eternal. That if you go to hell, you'll be there a while, and then you'll be annihilated, like just gone, like you never were. Which, I kind of like that idea. That would be a little bit better, but that's not something I remember, anybody in the past saying. But what's interesting is that this wasn't around when Lewis was doing, but, I mean, maybe you can think of the talking animals as being almost annihilated. Their rationality is gone. But, I mean, again, I've seen some books where they look at verses that could mean that, but it's one of those things where, like, you would never read that verse that way unless you came at it. You know what I mean? If you've seen that. So it's like, I can see that, but I don't think that's the primary meaning. But it's just kind of interesting that you could think of, now that's not what happens to the dwarves. But the animals become dumb animals. They lose their rationality. And isn't it poetically just that the propaganda minister who uses his tongue to deceive becomes a dumb animal? I mean, there's kind of a poetic justice in that. And then we meet Emeth. Do you know what Emeth means in Hebrew? It's the Hebrew word for truth. Isn't that cool? It means truth. And Emeth is the noble Calorman. Does anybody know during the Crusades, the Crusaders considered one of the soldiers, one of the Muslim soldiers, to be noble. They feared him, but they respected him. Anybody know what his name was? You remember studying this? It was called the Saladin. You ever seen the movie Kingdom of Heaven about the Crusades? Okay, the Arabic leader was a real person named Saladin, and he was a terrible. I mean, he was a great soldier, but they respected him. It's the same way that which Southern general did the Yankees respect, even though they feared him? Yeah, well, no, that would be the North. What Southern did would be Robert E. Lee. They respected him as a man of honor, even though they feared him, right? And during World War II, who was the one Nazi general that the Allies respected him as being maybe more noble, even though he was really scary? Was Rommel. Have you ever heard of a guy named Rommel? He was called the Desert Fox. In fact, there's a movie about him called The Desert Fox with James Mason. And he actually took part in the plot to kill Hitler, which was unsuccessful. But, the good enemy, or maybe the way the Greeks thought about Hector in the Trojan War. He's the good enemy. And Emeth is the noble Calorman. And he's disturbed when he realizes that Rishta Tarkin doesn't believe in Aslan or Tash. Otherwise, you wouldn't have this nonsense about them being the same. And he goes in because he's been seeking Tash all his life. And he's really upset when he realizes that they're going in disguised as merchants to sneak in. It's like that's not very noble, right? That's not very gentlemanly or knight-like, whatnot. So he's noble. And as he goes by, I think it's Jill or one of them, when Tyrion says that, there's something noble about this one. I love this young man. There's a nobility. Even though he's the enemy, he's noble. And he walks on in there, and everybody thinks that he dies and gets thrown out. But there's actually an older Calorman. He kills him and throws his body out. This is where it gets really confusing if you're a kid trying to put together what the heck is happening, right? And then they throw a shift in there. You hear the screaming, and that's pretty scary stuff. Right? And then Tyrion does something really cool. Do you understand what Tyrion does in terms of the stable? He grabs a hold of Rishta and says, "Let's go in together." Right? And he pushes both of them into the stable door, which is really brave and self-sacrificial. Right? And they go in there, and as soon as he goes in there, that's when we see the light. Let me show you. There's so much in here, but we won't do too much. This is through the stable door. This is chapter 12, and it's page 739. But the middle of the chapter, and 2/3 in. Middle of 739, Tyrion grabs Rishta and says, "Come in and meet Tash yourself." There was a deafening noise as when the ape had been flung and the earth shook, and the earth shook, and there was a blinding light. And in they go. It was not dark inside the stable, as he, Tyrion, had expected. He was in strong light. That was why he was blinking. So this is the first time we see strong light breaking into this twilight world. He turned to look at Rishta Tarkin, but Rishta was not looking at him. Rishta gave a great wail and pointed. Then he put his hands before his face and fell flat, face downwards on the ground. Tyrion looked in the direction where the Tarkin had pointed, and then he understood. A terrible figure was coming towards them. It was far smaller than the shape they had seen from the tower. It had a vulture's head and 4 arms. Its beak was open, and its eyes blazed. A croaky voice, "Thou hast called me into Narnia, Rishta Tarkin. Here I am. What hast thou to say?" Woo! Watch out. Playing with matches, a girl can get burned, as they say in matchmaking, right? In he goes, and I love how he talks about how the birds have eyes on either side, right? So they have to turn their head to see you, right? Woo! Eerie sort of stuff. And he just, Tash just plucks up Tyrion and carries him off. But then Tash turns and looks at Tyrion. It says, but immediately from behind Tash, strong and calm as the summer sea, a voice said, "Begone, monster, and take your lawful prey to your own place. In the name of Aslan and Aslan's great father, the Emperor oversee." The hideous creature vanished with the Tarkin still under its arms. Okay, what have, I guess it's Peter, what have the good Narnians just done? How did they get rid of Tash? You put the right language?
They called Aslan.
Good. So how do you, if the devil comes to you, how do you get rid of the devil? You what? You what him? You know the word? You rebuke him in the name of Jesus. That's literally what they do. They rebuke him in the name of Aslan. It's literally what you would do. They rebuke him, "Be gone," in the name of Christ and God the Father. Is kind of what he's saying here. And just to show you how unsystematic Lewis is compared to Tolkien, sometimes he says "Emperor over the sea." Sometimes he says "Emperor oversee." I think there's one place he says "the Emperor beyond the sea." You can't get it right. It's different each time. It's kind of funny. But Lewis, we don't care about those things, right? And when we go into Tolkien mode, then we'll care more about the details, right? We'll care more about the details. Are any of you going to do? Amanda, are you like my daughter that does those tests on the thing to find out which princess you are or which character you are? You do that stuff? Yeah, I could have guessed that. Have you done one for Tolkien to find out what Lord of the Rings character you are? Like your Arwen. I think my daughter came out as Arwen, I think. I'm trying to remember. Those are fun. She's always doing those things. But anyway, I never did do that, though. I don't know. Oh, do you know what?
I would probably end up as Samwise Gamgee.
Do you know what? I took a thing. I think I got about 90 or 95%. I didn't get a full 100, but I was close. There's a quiz you can take online, and the quiz is they show you a bunch of names, and you have to choose, is this the name of a character in Lord of the Rings or a one of those things that people take, or is it, medicine, like people that have mental health problems. What's that? Yeah, but the medicine they take, all those pills you take when you're bipolar or something. I don't, what would you call them? Antidepressant medicine. Is it? Yeah. Is this a name from Tolkien? Or he's asking you? Oh, you're terrible. It's really funny, and it's hard. It's hard to figure out. Is this the name of a character in the world of Tolkien, or is it an antidepressant medicine? And it's hard. I got a couple of them wrong. It's so funny how much they sound like it. It's terrible. I say she's never depressed. See. Robert's right. He just sits back and laughs. He doesn't get himself in trouble. He just kind of hangs back. I like that. Oh man! And he comes in, right? And so he disappears, and he turns around and sees them, the 7 kings and queens of Narnia, right? Who are they? The 7. Jill, Eustace, Peter, Edmund, Lucy, and who are the other 2? Diggory and Polly, who are now grown up. Who are now old. Although when you get to Aslan's country, you're no particular age. And I hope all of you felt that numinous thrill when we're watching Narnia be destroyed, and Lord Diggory says, "I saw it begin. I never thought I would see it end." It's just like so cool. It's like, oh my gosh, this guy's watched. And by the way, just to show you again that Lewis doesn't care about systematic things, he talks about these stars that are up there for thousands of years, and then they come down to Narnia, and they live thousands of years. Like, if you figure out the chronology, Narnia is like maybe 4,000 years from beginning to end, if even that long. But we don't worry about that. If you figure it out, it's not more than 4,000, probably more close to 3,000 years from beginning to end. And he's talking about stars, thousands of years. Anyway, he looks at her and he sees Jill. Now she looked cool and fresh as if she had just come from bathing. And at first he thought she looked older, but then didn't, and then he could never make up his mind at that point. And then he saw that the youngest of the kings was Eustace, right? Tyrion suddenly felt awkward about coming among these people with the blood and dust and sweat of a battle on him. Next moment, he realized that he was not in that state at all. He was fresh and cool and clean and dressed in such clothes as he would have worn for a great feast at Cair Paravel. He's been given his garments. What do they talk about that in Revelation? We'll get garments of praise or whatever. These heavenly garments and stuff. And it's wonderful. He thinks he's going to be older, but he's not. And then only C.S. Lewis would add this, in parentheses. But in Narnia, your good clothes were never your uncomfortable ones. They knew how to make things that felt beautiful as well as looking beautiful in Narnia. And there was no such thing as starch or flannel or elastic to be found from one end of the country to another. Lewis always was a kid at heart, right? He hated that stuff. And that's the joke about the British. They put so much starch in their pants that if you put them, they'll just stand up by themselves, that kind of stuff. Everything. Stiff upper lip. And then we already saw the part about Susan. And then they're in the garden, and there's all these wonderful fruits. And they say, can we choose a fruit? And I'll just tell you, he says, I have a feeling we've got to the country where everything is allowed. Right? I don't know if you remember that, Paula, but when we get to, I think I mentioned before, when we get to the top of purgatory in the Garden of Eden, right, that's where he says, now your will is upright, free, and whole. Do whatever you want, right? Because you've been cleansed of all evil desires, and now whatever you desire is right because you've been purified. It's a wonderful idea. Just take it and eat, right? And then I'm just kind of explaining. It takes a long time. We see the dwarves in the stable. Okay? They're in the same place as the good characters. But what's wrong with the dwarves? They're blind, right? They can't. They still think that they're in a pokey, smelly little stable, and they refuse to come out of that illusion. They're in the same space, but they think, and they've chosen cynicism and skepticism, and nobody can convince them otherwise. And this is important because You know, we live in a modern world that is all about empiricism. Have you ever heard the word empiricism? That's the idea that you can only trust your senses. If I can't see it, smell it, taste it, touch it, or hear it, it don't exist. Right? That's empiricism. And what Lewis does is give the lie to that. Because all their senses are messed up. You notice we go through every sense. They can't see, they can't hear anything right, even the smell is wrong, the taste, everything. He even tries to pick him up and throw him out, and he hits a wall. So it's a coronavirus, maybe. Oh, that's right. It does attack your sense of smell.
Well, it's just highlighting the cave, Plato's cave.
Good.
Thing again, and so his cave, whatever that analogy was.
Good. And we saw that in the silver chair too. But you're right.
The silver chair, and so I mean, it's just they created their own reality.
Good.
Their own false reality.
They chose it, and they can't be taken out of it. They try and try and try.
I have something to say. I've taken the quiz, and I'm Legolas.
Oh no! Which one are you? You're Legolas.
I did the quiz 2 times.
You are not Legolas.
I did it 2 times.
Yeah, no way.
And it says Legolas Greenleaf. I did it 2 times.
Twice. You're Legolas.
Blonde and young.
Yes.
Legolas.
I did it on BuzzFeed. Oh yeah.
He's the pretty boy. He's the pretty boy.
Legolas.
I'm Legolas.
What is the search?
Oh my gosh, just
Which
keep
Lord of the
going,
Rings
please keep
character
going.
are you?
No, don't do it. Don't do it.
Please keep going.
I'm sorry.
I had a long drive.
Anyway, so they try to help them, right? And then nothing can be done, right? And then all of a sudden, Aslan shows up, right? And that's the very end of the chapter on page 747. They cannot convince them. And then all of a sudden, Aslan shows. Let him alone, said Eustace. But as he spoke, the earth trembled. The sweet air grew suddenly sweeter. A brightness flashed behind them. All turned. Tyrion turned last because he was afraid. There stood his heart's desire, huge and real, the golden lion, Aslan himself. About 70 to 80% of this book is over, and this is the first time we meet Aslan. Right? There's just no place for him in Narnia. Is it? I mean, this is the first time we see him. And already the others were kneeling in a circle around his forepaws and burying their hands and faces in his mane. Well done, last of the kings of Narnia, who stood firm at the darkest hour. But Aslan, said Lucy, will you do something for these poor dwarves? Remember what Lucy asked Aslan to do in the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Oh, Aslan, isn't there something you can do for our brother Edmund? Mm-hmm. All will be done. Dearest, said Aslan, and now he's going to speak the most un-Calvinist line in the whole book, the whole Chronicles of Narnia. Dearest, I will show you both what I can and what I cannot do. And the Calvinists, what do you mean God can't do something? But maybe there is something God can't do. Now, God can do anything, but if God sets a limit upon himself, he can put a limit. If God's limit is he will not force us to love him, then that suggests, Lewis says in another book, that the people in hell are successful rebels to the end. The doors to hell, he says, are locked on the inside. But look, I'll show you what I can and can't do. And he roars, and suddenly a feast is laid out in front of the dwarves. And at first they eat real fast, but it's clear they can't really taste the food. They think it's dirty hay and water from a trough, all that sort of stuff. And then they think someone's got a better thing, and they start fighting back and forth. They can't do it. And then Aslan explains it all, the last paragraph there. The dwarf says, well, at any rate, there's no humbug here. We haven't let anyone take us in. The dwarves are for the dwarves. You see, they will not let us help them. They have chosen cunning instead of belief. Their prison is only in their own mind, but they are in that prison and so afraid of being taken in that they cannot be taken out. Wow. See? In that sense, hell is something we choose. See, we've got this idea that life is like college, and if we get an A, we go to heaven. If we get an F, we go to hell, right? No. The people that are in hell ultimately want to be there because, see, being in heaven is not like getting an A. Being in heaven means spending eternity with God. And if you don't want to be with God, then you don't want to be in heaven, right? You don't want to be there if it's, it's, well, and they have chosen this. They prefer not to be taken in. We don't want any humbug here. We're not going to, we just want to stay trapped in our own mind. And that's kind of what happens at the end. And it's important to contrast this with Emeth, right? Because you might think of the dwarves as being like the Pharisees, the people who should have followed Jesus, but instead they chose a sort of cynicism and skepticism and hypocrisy and pride and all that sort of stuff. Where maybe think of Emeth as the tax collectors and prostitutes who went after him. Right? Now, it's important to understand that Emeth does not mean universal salvation. The idea that everybody's saved or it's all generic. Right? The only way this would be supporting universal salvation is if Emeth came before Aslan and said, "Excuse me, sir, I'm here for the Tash part of heaven. Would you please direct me there?" And if he did that, that would be universal salvation. What this is, that's a little troubling, is it borders on what we might call post-mortem salvation. Anybody guess what I mean by that? Post-mortem. You know what that means? Fancy Latin way of saying? Post-mortem. Well, what does post mean? After. And mortem, death. Okay? So post-mortem means after death. So it sounds like someone's getting a second chance after death. And in Christianity, whatever denomination you're from, it's basically, you got to make your choice before you die. Okay, once you die, all bets are off. And you could argue that it borders on that. But for Lewis, if you read his other book called The Great Divorce, it's more of, just think about this, the moment of our death is an eternal moment. The moment we die, we step out of time into eternity. And that moment, that eternal moment of our death, contains every moment of our life. Every moment, every decision, whatnot, is contained in that moment. And so, and remember, we talk about, what about someone that never has a chance to become a Christian? Well, we always think about some guy in the middle of Africa or something. But those people are right here in Houston. If you grew up in a home that was completely hypocritical, where every single reference to God or Jesus was bad, so that you ended up seeing it only as deceitful and hypocritical, I think that it would be psychologically impossible for that person to become a Christian after being so twisted like that. But maybe at the moment of your death, that eternal moment, when all the twists come off and you're face to face, if everything in your life was moving towards that moment, that will be the climax. That would be nice. I wouldn't preach that as a doctrine, and certainly C.S. Lewis never did. But what if? Because again, this boy, Emeth, not only did he have no knowledge of Aslan, the only time he heard the name Aslan was he was a lion demon from the evil country up north. I mean, there's no way for him. So he took what he knew and was truly seeking. And for Lewis, he took very seriously Jesus' phrase, "Seek and you shall find. For all who seek shall find." And maybe that finding will come at the last moment. Aslan says it best. He says, "If your desire had not been for me, you would not have sought so long or so hard. For all get what they truly desire." Of course, they don't always like it, do they? As we saw before with the dwarves and things like that. We all get what we desire. Isn't that what Aslan told the children at the end of The Magician's Nephew? The witch got what she wanted, eternal life and eternal youth. But she discovered too late it was eternal misery. Right? Which is what would have happened to us if after we fell, we turned back and ate from the tree of life. then we would have been alive forever in the state of endless corruption. You look, you're thinking deeply, Paula.
I sort of found that this part of the ending with Emmett very much, I guess, comforting, because I think there's a lot of people, especially once you're a parent, you realize you only know what you know. And
Yeah.
then you can forgive your parents for all the things that they didn't know.
Right.
Raising you that you didn't like or whatever else. And so in religion, I have, I don't know. I have Jewish friends, we have Hindu friends, we have Buddhist friends, we have Muslim friends. We have pretty much the full gamut. We have some who are nothing. And I sort of feel like they're all good people, and that how they won't be rewarded in heaven is I get that Christ is the Savior and all of that, but for them not knowing anything, and because of just in the countries they were raised,
Right.
that until they really became more exposed to Christianity, that yes, their thought processes. But if you don't know what you don't know,
Right.
it's impossible for someone. How can someone be damned
Right.
to hell for the rest of their lives without knowing even? It's possible there's people who don't really know what Christ was about.
Right.
So I don't. This was a good answer to me.
I do. Like I said, like I said, Lewis too would not preach it as a doctrine. It's not clear enough, but it makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, it makes sense that people are moving towards him in that direction, so that basically, the way I would explain this, what happens to Emeth is like what happens to the Magi when they come before the Christ child. Right? They followed the limited wisdom they had, and it led them to the child. When they got there, they could have rejected it, but they recognized this was the end of their journey. And I like to see Emeth as the Magi, but that last moment is the moment of his death. And that's when it all comes together. And I'm hopeful about that, right?
Good is good.
Yeah.
Regardless of what your religion is.
And what you're saying is what Aslan says. He says, one second. He says, wait a minute. It's hard to find it sometimes. He says, okay, therefore, if any man, he says, I take to me the services which thou hast done to him, for I and Tash are of such different kinds, that no service which is vile can be done to me, and none which is not vile can be done to him. Therefore, if any man swear by Tash and keep his oath for the oath's sake, it is by me that he is truly sworn, though he know it not, and it is I who reward him. And if any man do a cruelty in my name, then though he says the name Aslan, it is Tash whom he serves, and by Tash his deed is accepted. Dost thou understand, child? I said, Lord, thou knowest how much I understand. But I said also, for the truth constrained me, yes, I have been seeking Tash all my days. Beloved, said the glorious one, unless thy desire had been for me, thou wouldst not have sought so long and so truly, for all find what they truly seek. And only Lewis would build up to this really incredible moment, further up and further in, and then Tash says, and since then, O kings, I didn't give you a page, I'm sorry, 757, page 757. It's, I guess, the middle of chapter 15. He says, since then, O kings, I have been wandering to find him, and my happiness is so great that it even weakens me like a wound. And this is the marvel of marvels, that he called me beloved, me who am but as a dog. Eh? What's that? Said one of the dogs. It's really wonderful. We build up this incredibly emotional moment, and then the dog's, oh, what are you saying? Sir, said Emeth, it is but a fashion of speech which we have in Calorman. Well, I can't say it's one I like very much, said the dog. He doesn't mean any harm, said an older dog. After all, we call our puppies boys when they don't behave properly. So we do, said the first dog. Or girls. Shh, that's not a nice word to use. You get it? You get the joke? Okay. The word you're not allowed to call a girl. You can call her anything you want, but don't use that word. Okay. There we go. Chris has got it. But further up and further in, beyond the Shadowlands, on and on. Oh, man, I'm going to pass out. All right, this is the last time I use this mask. I'm going back to my old one. Woo! You know, you know,
This is like a long time to wear this kind of mask. That's why for class I normally wear that neck.
maybe that's because this is the one they had. It's got cotton, but it's got like a little spandex and stuff in. I don't know. It's just I don't remember it being like this when I wore it at the graduation.
Well, it was probably you're outside. It was going to be windy.
Oh, you know, maybe that's it. There was more air kind of blowing in. But
Now it's just kind of.
yeah, I'm just feeling it. You know, I don't know what waterboarding is like, but that seems to feel like what it is. It's like in our mouth or something like that. Yeah, it's not that bad. But the so anyway, what did you think about the incredible scene of the destruction of Narnia? Oh my gosh, right? All the stars start falling. That's my picture there. All the stars start falling, coming out. Remember, we saw all the stars come alive in Magician's Nephew. Now, as they're dying, and the blackness is growing, the darkness is growing as they're all gone, all shooting down to the end, right? And then Father Time, who was, remember, sleeping in Underland? That is old Father Time. He will wake at the end of the world, right? And he blows his horn, and Aslan says his name is Time, but now he will have a new name. And he either means Saturn, or he might mean eternity. Now he's eternity. But he blows his horn, and everything comes up. And then, remember, also buried in Underland were these weird-looking monsters. The monsters come up and chase all the Narnians to the door, and then they devour Narnia. It's so apocalyptic. And it is the great judgment of the sheep and the goats, like we said before. And some come, and they go away. But others look at Aslan and love him, and they go to his right. The final judgment. Some call that the white throne judgment. Jesus on the white throne. And was that not awesome when the sun reached out and swallowed the moon? And then Aslan says, now make an end. You remember what happened? The giant? Yeah, grabs it. And what did he do? He squeezed it in his hand as if it were an orange. And then the light goes out. And immediately, everything starts freezing. So he was son of Adam, High King Peter, close the door. And as he's closing the door, it's actually skidding over the ice. And he locks the key. And that's the end of Narnia. And of course, what would happen if you went to the wood between the worlds? Now, right? The little pond that was Narnia, be gone. Yeah, just like Charmed. We all shriveled up. It's the end of Narnia. But it's just amazing, the whole thing. And then they're called to go further up and further in, further up, on and on, endless journey. And as they go deeper, what do they find in heaven, in Aslan's country? They're in Narnia. But this is the true Narnia. This is the Platonic form of Narnia, the real Narnia, of which their Narnia was just an imitation. And Lord Diggory, who's a professor, says, it's all in Plato. It's all in Plato. What do they teach them? I just love it. You know, he's telling the professor to the end. But it's like, oh my gosh. In other words, nothing is lost. Nothing good is lost. This will make Amanda happy. Okay? Lewis suggests in The Problem of Pain, he said, I see no reason why there wouldn't be animals in heaven. Now, when he said that, he didn't mean animals have souls, but he says, how can there be something good on the earth? Dogness, catness, lioness, tigerness, bearness. Lioness, tigerness, bearness. Oh my, thank you, very good. Okay. I thought you were losing me there. And or maybe you should have said oh minus. Okay, but anyway.
Yeah, I was trying to decide.
Oh minus, yeah. Oh minus. But so why not? So Amanda, maybe your Chihuahua will be in heaven with you.
My Chihuahua.
He missed it. He missed it. Robert, okay, wait. Let's see if he turns red again.
I have a Chihuahua. Did he say I have a
No, that was the joke from a couple months ago. He was. I didn't realize he was being funny.
Chihuahua? I absolutely believe animals will be in heaven.
So why not? I mean, what? Again, heaven's going to be the.
All the female dogs going to get there.
Oh man, okay. Robert's always smart because he always sits next to Clinton Because if there's any slapping upside the head, it's going to be Clinton. He's going to be safe. It's like I remember these two guys, are in the woods and they're being chased by a bear. And the guy's like, I got to run fast. I got to run fast. I got to run fast. And the other one said, I don't have to run super fast. I just have to run faster than you. You get the point, right? Anyway, keep yourself safe right there. But anyway, I'm going to pass out. Okay. Anyway. What's that? Oh, there we go. That's right, race. My father was quite a good basketball player when he was a kid. And one time he had a race with my uncle is his brother, but he's like 10 years younger, actually 13 years younger. And he raced where my uncle ran straight and my father ran backwards, and he beat him. It's sort of infamous. He beat him running backwards because he was a good athlete. Until he got married, and then whoop, whoop. And as my father said, he ended up with worse stretch marks than my mother did. That's what I'm saying. Paula, did you fatten up your husband when you got married?
Did I do what?
Did you fatten up your husband after the first? That was good. Okay, you fed him healthily. Actually, the reason my father got heavy is the reason a lot of guys get heavy, because when they're young, they're like super athletic. They eat a lot, but they're super athletic. And then they get married and they sort of settle down, and they're still eating a lot, but they're not athletic anymore. And that often happens. But that didn't happen to me because I never did anything before or after. So I mean, I was fine. You've heard my motto when it comes to exercise. Did I tell you my motto? No pain, no pain. That's it. Yeah, you remember, no pain, no pain. See? Okay. We're probably out of time. Last thought. This is so beautiful. Let's just jump to the end. Last couple pages. We'll end there. There we go. Okay. Two things, and then we'll end. First is 1 second. Where's the page? Where is it? Here it is. First, page 760 in the middle of it. This is the very end of chapter 15. The very end of chapter 15. It's all in Plato. And it's the second to last paragraph, the end of the chapter. The unicorn, Jewel, explains best how everybody's feeling. I have come home at last. This is my real country. I belong here. This is the land I have been looking for all my life, though I never knew it till now. The reason why we love the old Narnia is that it sometimes looked a little like this. Bree! Come further up. Come further in. See, that's it. This is the true country. This is my true home. I've made it to my true home, and I never knew it, but I felt glimpses of it. And now that I'm here, I recognize this is the end of my journey. That's it. Heaven is all about recognition in C.S. Lewis's writing. It's the thing we've always yearned for. It's the sound of music from the other room. From the other room, he says, the scent of a flower we've never seen. News from a country we've never visited. It's just on the other side of the door waiting. It's wonderful. And then finally, the very end of the last chapter, it's the last page, 767. Aslan finally shows up at the end. And the kids are like, please don't send us back to our world. Aslan, please don't send us. And at almost the end, no fear of that, said Aslan. Have you not guessed? Their hearts leapt up, and a wild hope rose within them. You know what that wild hope is? That they're dead. I love it. This is an amazing book. By the way, if the end of the world is coming, it's going to happen after you get your final review from Michael, not before. Okay, you understand? You're not getting out of that. Okay. And by the way, read this again carefully, because I believe that heaven is like living inside of a Michael Collins painting. It's basically like living in light and climbing up waterfalls of light. So it is living in a Michael Collins painting. It's amazing. So, yeah, Michael will be happy to know that heaven is all oils instead of watercolors. I don't know. There might be a couple collages in the corners, There we go. We'll find a collage for you up there. But anyway, then he says, there was a real railway accident, said Aslan softly. Your father and mother and all of you, except Susan, and all of you are, as you used to call it in the Shadowlands, dead. The term is over. The holidays have begun. The dream is ended. This is the morning. Wow. You see, You understand how crazy America is now? We're not allowed, if Lupe has a show at Bel Air, they won't be able to call it a Christmas concert. They'll have to call it a holiday concert. But what does holiday mean? It means holy day. You can't get away from it. That's what it means anyway, holiday. It's wonderful. Wonderful. So, isn't this wonderful? The dream, this is the morning where you're really awake now. We've made it through. And C.S. Lewis loved being a professor like I do, but all professors yearn for the summer just as much as you guys do, okay? So let's make that clear. Or for, at this point, for Christmas, right? And as he spoke to them, as he spoke, he no longer looked to them like a lion. You know why? What does he look like now?
Jesus.
He looks like Jesus, right? Because he is speaking to the people at this point, the humans. And now he looks like the Aslan of our world. But the things that began to happen after that were so great and beautiful that I cannot write them. And for us, this is the end of all the stories. And we can most truly say that they all lived happily ever after. But for them, it was only the beginning of the real story. All their life in this world and all their adventures in Narnia had only been the cover and the title page. Now at last they were beginning chapter 1 of the great story, which no one on earth has read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. God, I remember driving in the car through, I don't know where we were, on the way to Grand Canyon or something like that, and it's not late, and we're listening to the last battle, and my son is in the back seat of the car, and he's on 7 or something, and he is just struggling to stay awake because he's so excited listening to the end of the last battle. The part when they're moving so fast, they're like a speedboat, and they're going up, and he's like, yeah, I can see him in the rear view mirror, so excited, and he's fighting to stay awake because he's just like, his idea of heaven, when he was a little kid was, you never have to go to sleep. You can always stay awake, right? Yeah. And were your kids ever like that? They're like, I want to stay awake all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'd say, okay, and they'd be asleep on the couch before we even said yes.
There we go, see? And it's like, let them go. But yeah, my son used to believe that he slept with his eyes open. No, you're really asleep. We fight it so much and fight it so. Wow, good job, folks. Okay, so again, we'll start emailing you, but in 2 weeks, I'll send, like I said, I literally live 1 mile from you on the beachside side. And you have ideas for food? Follow? Make something cool. That's a good idea. Just said that. Like I said, I can make a big thing of mashed potatoes, so we'll have a lot of stuff on the side, but we'll start planning. It's 2 weeks from today. Is that the second? Yeah, I guess you're right. It is the second. Yeah, Wednesday the 2nd. 2 weeks. I guess I don't know. What's a good time for people? Like 6:30 or 6? I don't know what's a good time for people. Oh, well, she's in the MLA though, so yeah. Yeah, I'll send that an email. We'll start figuring it out and stuff like that. And again, if you can't make it or you're worried about, we'll see. If there's a super outbreak, whatever, if we're nervous, you can just email me. Yeah. What's the alert? Oh, was there? Oh no, what is it? What's going on now? I didn't see it.
The entire city got
Are we?